But I am going to show you how to French a lamb rack, because I know everybody wants to do that at home. I recommend you get someone else to do it for you if you can, but it's a good thing to know how to do. I mentioned earlier I'm from Canada, and in Canada the culinary program it's an apprenticeship, and you go to school for a year, you kind of do an intake program, and then you do an apprenticeship. And in part of that whole process, you have to go through baking, pastry, and butchery, meat cutting. And so you kind of learn the gamut, and which are great things, skills to have. It's kind of become less common to use those skills nowadays. We have a lot of streamlines. Henry Ford came up with the assembly line, and we've been streamlining ever since. And so we have other people do a lot of the work for us. We can get, we can get ready to cook steaks that are top quality, flown in from Japan, from the Midwest, from Kansas. We largely use Creekstone beef in our hotel. We use Elysian Fields lamb, and we kind of pick the best of the best and try to run with it. So I'm going to do two things at once, because that's the way we're supposed to do it, to be efficient. But I have a lamb here, which I'm gonna French. I don't think Gail needs it, but he told me to make it anyway, and just in case. So push comes to shove, we'll get a piece of lamb to try. And I'm going to make pickled beans. So the next course is going to be the lamb, which we marinated. And again, we took some of the greens. We took the mustard greens, marinated the lamb in that for 48 hours, and then as well as garlic and olive oil and seasoning. And then we grilled it on the wood fire. And then we're serving it with some wilted greens, pickled beans, which are also from Kai Kai Farm, right here on Kai Kai Farm. So, as I mentioned, I grew up on a farm. And where I'm from, like, virtually everything is farm. We have so many great farms, a lot of restaurants, like there's a real passion for farm to table. We have like I would say a large hippie community in Western Canada, and they've kind of gone back to their roots. So you can get homespun wool socks and at the farmer's market. People make and do everything. They make cheese, they make balsamic vinegar, they make their own champagne. I used to have a guy who would come to the hotel, and his name was Running Squirrel, and he named himself that. And but he would go up into the mountains, and he would pick alpine strawberries, and he'd come down with flats of just tiny little white strawberries that were the most delicious thing you ever had in your life. That kind of thing is just ingrained in my cooking. So I try to just continue on, like, using things over and over and over again if I can. So anything on this menu, I've tried to incorporate as many iterations or uses out of the product that we have. Pickled beans. I do a quick pickle. So this is what they call, technically it's cheating, but crude but effective. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these beans and I'm going to just do it to show you. It's not going to have a massive effect at this stage because it's what we do is you can do the same thing with pickles. You ice the beans, you ice cucumbers. I know people have seen it where you ice green onions and you make them crisp. That's basically the plan here. So I'm taking these beans and I'm going to ice them, put them in ice water. You can put them for ideally a few hours, potentially, in a perfect case scenario, 4 hours to overnight. You do the same thing with we make all our own pickles in the hotel. We slice cucumbers. We'll put them in ice water, salt ice water. Overnight, you can buy pickling lime and do that. That'll make them more crunchy. And then, then once you'll drain that off, the cucumber, the pickle, the bean will be just quite a bit more crunchy. And that will lend itself to when you actually get into the pickling process. So this is a rack of lamb. And a rack of lamb is basically the rib. And I like to used to teach my kids this, but I tickle them like crazy, because this really comes from the base of the shoulder right down here. And usually it's 8 bones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 bones, 10 bones sometimes, between 8. You have floating ribs and you have shoulder ribs. But it comes right down up from under the shoulder to the bottom of the ribs. And then once you get down and below that, then you get into the loin. So this would be the equivalent, the lamb equivalent of like a prime rib roast. And then below that would be where you'd have the New York steak in the short loin. And then underneath in the rib, in the loin end, is where the tenderloin would be on the inside. This would be an unfinished, right, and nothing done to it. Here's the shoulder blade. So this is the shoulder end. This is the short loin end. Lamb has a type of skin which they've removed, and it's like a silver skin. They call it fell. And it actually, anybody familiar with lanolin, like lanolin soap, how it smells sheepy? That fell is very, very, like it's just imbued with that taste. So we want to get rid of that. If you ever see it, it kind of looks silver, and it's a skin, and it's kind of a membrane between the meat and the skin. And you never see how like they can make themselves twitch, or a fly lands on it and they can kind of like almost like twitch their muscle. Well, that fell allows them to do that. And then here you have the eye. You can see the eye, and this would be in the shoulder. And lots of times they're taking this piece here out of the shoulder and they're selling that as a boneless short rib now. Delicious, tastes great. I don't fault them for that. So this, we basically are going to take this off. So there's a fat cap, which we've rendered and used for roasting potatoes. So I'm going to strong arm it, but this just peels right off. Like I said, get someone else to do it if you can. Talk to your butcher. He knows how to do it. It's really good when it's cold to French the rack, but it's very hard to get this piece off when this fat's cold and congealed. So fortunately, I made a sterner stuff than this lamb, I think, and I will get it. All right, we got that off. Whew. So this is where that shoulder muscle is. There's a little bit of the shoulder blade scapula here, which we're going to take off. I am going to just. Hey, you can do all kinds of. There's actually quite a bit of meat. You can trim this. I would basically cut this out. This you can grind. You can make, kibbeh, kofta. You can make lamb patties, lamb burgers, shepherd's pie, right? Not cottage pie, shepherd's pie. Bacon, pancetta, lamb pancetta. A million things you could do with it. If you were to do that, you'd take all this dark colored skin off. It's actually muscle. This is the muscle I was telling you about, how they can twitch on their back and move their skin over their whole body. This little muscle connects to the fell and the skin, and that allows it to do that. Trim all this fat, render it out. A lot of cultures, they cook with lamb fat, lamb and rice. So if you were to do cook ground lamb into rice, you can cook it. My wife makes this thing called chavapi, which is basically ground lamb and beef, 50-50. Marinated with great onions and parsley and oregano, and you make little meatballs and then grill them and eat them in pita. Delicious. Yeah, the sky's the limit with what you want to do with it. So we're Frenching, and obviously well, maybe logically, the concept of Frenching, everybody's seen the rack of lamb with the little paper coronets on top. That's the French influence. The French people love that stuff. So basically, anytime there's rules kind of in meat cutting, a lot of people don't know them, but there are. So a strip loin steak, the fat cap, so you'll have this, what they call backstrap, this strap. So there's, people call strip loins backstrap from venison and that sort of thing. But this here is a tendon that runs down the back of the spine, and it's basically it's very, very chewy. You can't eat it, and that gets trimmed off. Chain gets trimmed off, which is basically the muscles that attach to the spinal column. This all gets trimmed, and this peeled back, and basically New York strip, rack, the width of fat you leave on is the width of basically your palm. Relaxed palm, you don't have to be super tight with that. And then veal is, depending on the size of your hand, 2 to 3 fingers. So you leave 2 to 3 fingers width of fat on it, and that fat obviously is going to add flavor and make it, it'll render as it cooks. Some people, especially like my parents' generation, would always eat the fat, whereas my children would not touch it with a 10-foot pole. So times have changed and palates have changed, but the fat bastes the meat, keeps it moist, and that is a very good thing in the cooking. So my vinegar and water, so this is, the recipe's there. I think it's a cup of vinegar, 2 cups of water, giving me 3 cups total. It's come to a boil. So I'm going to pause. Lemmy's going to have to wait for a second. I'm going to add my aromatics, which is basically garlic, herbs. I have dill, I have thyme, I have bay leaf. I'm going to add that in there. And then just get that mixed in. I'm going to take my beans and I'm going to drain them. Just remove all that water and ice. Shake it off. So basically you want that flavor. Boil it a little bit. It doesn't have to be too long. We're not making a soup or a broth or anything. We're just trying to get it softened up so it releases. And then hot, we pour that over the beans. And then I'm going to use the bottom of my wooden spoon just to pack it down. And then I would cover that or put a weight on it. In a perfect world, I'm just going to cover it. And I would let that sit in the refrigerator minimum of 24 hours. 48 is ideal. It'll keep for up to a month. And you can free to do what you want, but I think if you do this at home, you make your own pickles, cucumbers, you will have a far superior product than anything you can buy in the store, except for there's one company called Boobies that does a lactic fermentation, which is fantastic. But anything else, you'd be much better off to do this. It's very easy, and you can do stuff. If you're interested in Asian cuisine, you could substitute daikon root and use rice vinegar instead. Put a little pinch of sugar in. There's no sugar in this. This is kind of a dilly bean, but you'll have fantastic pickles. Very little effort, very good flavor. You need a measuring cup but cucumbers, carrots, you name it, you can do it. It's fantastic. Great flavor. So I'm going to have to do more 2 things at once in a second here. How are you looking, Chef? Everything's good? Okay, I'm going to French this rack, and then you need it? No. No? All right. We don't need it. I'm going to do it anyway. So, back to this. This is basically the loin here, the eye of the meat, and this is the good stuff. There's another little piece of meat running through the middle here of this fat cap, and then I have basically 2.5 inch wide fat cap. So I'm going to take this off, trim this. I don't know that, yeah, I don't know if anyone's counting on a butchery demo today, but you're getting one. So the bones, Frenching the bones basically just means they scrape everything off the bone. In the style of the French, I worked many years. I worked in France. I worked for a 3 Michelin star chef, and Antoine Westerman, and he loves stuff like this. If it was hard to do, that was what we did. And we did it for years of hard labor. And we're better people for it, I think, in the culinary sense. So you basically want to, each of these bones has a membrane on it, and that protects the bone. Obviously, we want to remove it. That's the Frenching part. And so we just go back and forth, and we get the bone clean. And everybody has, a lot of people have, there's a million ways to do this. I do it this way just because I think it's the most efficient. Some people, and I know quite a few, especially in Florida, they take monofilament line, fishing line, like 50, 100-pound test, 50-pound test would work, and they will literally like tie a piece to a post like that or a sink, and then they'll wrap it around the bone, and they'll just pull the bone, and the meat just comes right off. I like to do it kind of all like this is my preferred method. So I scrape these down. I get the front of the bone clean. The back of the bone, I left this membrane on, and I'm going to clean it a little more because it just makes it easier later. So I want to push everything off to the front, get into the sides a bit. And then I'm just gonna peel this back so I can take the part of my knife and just work this away like that. And I'm gonna go on both sides of the thing, both sides of the bone, but I'm gonna do all one side, just get it started. On this one, sometimes they have a little, this one looks like it broke a rib, but that's okay. It recovered. Anyway, if you get it started, you get this piece here worked away, it'll actually all come off in one piece. And then I don't have to scrape each bone individually. But it does take a second sometimes to get it started. All right. Once you start doing that, you realize you didn't do the first part well enough. That's the way. So you'll see that it took us hours and hours to prepare your dinner tonight. Because if you got to do 50 of them, it takes a long time. I used to work with this Japanese guy, and he could do this in minutes. It was uncanny. Everybody wanted to be like him until they got put in the butcher shop and they had to spend a day doing it. And then they realized they wanted nothing to do with being like him. It's better to be in the hot kitchen than doing this, to the point where you get so good at it you can do it in a minute. All right. So you can see here, I kind of got these worked away. And again, sometimes they work with you, sometimes they work against you. It's like that in life and in cooking. But you just got to be perseverant and keep on it. It'll come off, And so there's, like I said, there's different methods. Some people, the classic way is to literally scrape every bone. You cut the meat out in between, and you would scrape every bone. And so this bone here, that last one, is an extra bone, and I'm going to just get rid of that one. So I'm not going to worry about Frenching it. But if you see, now that I kind of cleared it, I can just scrape these right down to that fat cap with little, not no effort, but comparatively little effort. And I'm going to end up with a Frenched rack. Yeah, I'm gonna pull that wonky one on the end. Mind you, there's a little one, a half bone. Gail did all this for you. I was in meetings, thankfully. The only time I was thankful for meetings. Gail does 90% of the hard lifting, to be honest. That's the best deal you can have is a good right-hand man. And I got the best deal, so he did it all. But anyways, so I take that down. The rack's pretty much Frenched. You know, I can go through. There's going to be some trim in here and there. Okay, let's do it. We're in. We're going to do the whole thing. I'm going to scrape right down to that fat cap, and I'm going to push this past it on the inside. On the outside, I'm going to, on this is the presentation side, and I'm going to trim it all up, make it look pretty. But that is going to be, but this back side, I'm going to push just a little beyond the fat cap. And I can just boom. Okay. So once I'm past that fat cap, you see how you can't see anything there? I can just basically come in here, clean it off, and my rack is Frenched. Again, I'll take a towel and tidy it up, and just pull the bone clean. And if I was a Frenchman, I would take fancy little paper hats and put on the end of each one of these, but I'm not, so I won't. And then this bone here, so these ribs are all solid bone. This one has cartilage in it, and it's kind of the back, like the top end. So this is actually goes into like where the stomach is. And I'm going to just take that out, and it will not be missed. That goes out, and then I have my rack. I'm just going to clean it up, any trim, and that is it. So this here is called silver skin, and I don't want that. It's connective tissue, and it's a little bit tough to chew. So I don't want it. There's a nice piece of fat there, which will cook beautifully, and I want to keep that. So I kind of just have to be delicate and get in here, and I'm going to trim this up. Man, I didn't bring my razor blade today. Oh, that smells good. So I'm going to just, it's called stealing a knife. People think it sharpens it. It doesn't actually sharpen. Your knife is as sharp as it is going to be, but it just trues the blade. The more you cut and scrape and push, you have basically just like a V like this. And as you push on it, it starts to go like that. So when you're trying to cut it, it's not cutting straight. It's not cutting true. So you pass it on the steel, it'll straighten it up. And it just makes it a little bit, feel sharper for sure, but it just trues that edge. So, and then I'm going to trim this silver skin off. Silver skin is tough. It doesn't break down with cooking. the fat will cook down and render out. Silver skin will not. You will be chewing it. And so we try to make it as pleasant as possible to dine with us, so we remove it. All right. So this fat I'm just going to leave on, and that's basically what you end up with. So you start with a big piece, and you end up with quite a bit less. And this probably weighs about 2 pounds. So I'm going to take this, and I'll just cut between the bones, and then there's a little. And then we made a nice marinade. We talked about that earlier, where we've taken mustard greens and pureed them with olive oil and seasoning, which I have right here, basically just in a blender. You can use any kind of thing you want for marinades. So ideally, you'll roll this around in your marinade, and then you'll pack it in a Ziploc bag, leave it in the fridge overnight. You don't add salt. It's not never. Mostly you wouldn't add salt to something like this because you don't want to. You don't want it to wilt it. You don't want salt will draw moisture out of the meat, and so you want to season it before you cook it. But there are exceptions to that rule. In Asian cooking, very often they will take. They'll use soy sauce, which has a high salt content, and that's actually part of what you're trying to get to. So there are exceptions to the rule. You can't never say never. But in this particular instance, red meat, stuff like this, where you're